One time I had a case where the demon who was possessing, he had actually seen Our Lady's interior life at the first instance of his creation. So if you actually look at what happens when angels are created, they call it the three instances. The first instance is that they're created, the whole hierarchy of angels, literally billions upon billions of angels are instantaneously created in a hierarchy. In that first instance, though, God also created them into a perfect act of knowing. That meant that they knew who God was, what their relationship with Him was, what their assigned task was for why He created them. That meant who and what they were, their nature. It also meant they understood their relationship to all the other angels. St. Thomas says that they even saw the temptation, or what would happen if Lucifer fell, who they would be under if they fell, but also the punishment if they fell, but then also the reward. If they were to, what the reward would be if they were faithful. They saw the totality of that all instantly at once. And then at that moment, St. Thomas says that because they saw that intellectually, there was a concomitant delight in the will in seeing how beautiful that was God's plan. And then they made their choice, which in the second instance. And then the difference between us and angels is that we're pretty stupid, right? We're dumb. I mean, all you got to do is turn on the television and you get a pretty quick indicator of that, right? In fact, it seems like the number of people carrying around weapons-grade stupidity keeps increasing all the time, right? So it's like, wow. That means that as human beings, whenever we make a choice, the definition of choice is or free choice is an attribute of the will in which the will is able to make a determination between goods. Okay. Now that determination means that when we make a choice, we kind of fix our will in something. And as time goes on, because we're not that bright, that fixedness that we have in relationship to the evil or the good is, it takes time to build up to where we become more and more fixed in it. Right? It doesn't mean we can't commit a moral sin and therefore determine our eternal destiny, because if we die in the state of mortal sin or in the state of grace, God fixes our wills either in evil or in good, depending on whether we're in the state of grace or not. Okay? So that's it. But with the angels, because they had perfect comprehension of exactly what they were doing, there was no ignorance, there was no weakness like us who, we see the chocolate and we're like, oh, gotta have the chocolate, right? They're not like that. They had full comprehension of it. That meant that their choice was much freer than ours is. And that means when they made their choice, they fixed their will permanently in that thing, whether it was good or bad. In fact, one time I was dragging this demon through the fact that he was created to have I said, so you were created to have the beatific vision, yeah, and you were created to do this magnificent task, yeah, and you were created to have this wonderful relationship with everybody in heaven, yeah, and I go through all these different things, and then you knew that if you chose against that you'd end up in hell, yeah, you'd never see God, yes, and that you would suffer for all eternity, yes, and you'd do it again, yes. They literally are fixed in that, okay? This is why you hear from time to time today, there has been the resurrection of a heresy that originally came from Origen, but it's called I gotta remember this word. Apokatastasis. It was a heresy that was formally condemned by the Council of Constantinople, which says that in the end, the people in hell will get a second chance or possibly get back into heaven. The church has formally condemned that proposition. Once you're in hell, it's eternal. In fact, one of the things you actually see with demons, in sessions, you can actually make their suffering increase by talking about this is never going to end. The suffering you're undergoing is never going to end. And they recognize that, right? And it causes, just recognizing that it's eternal, it's never going to change, causes them more pain. So then they made their choice, and every single angel will tell you that their fundamental failure was sacrifice. And the reason that it was their fundamental failure is because in their choice, St. Thomas says that they were originally created in this act of knowing, and so they saw all of the perfections that the higher angels and the saints and that God had, and they saw those. And so their sacrifice was that there was one particular perfection that they had to be willing to forego in order to fulfill their task. And if they sacrificed that to God, if they were willing to turn away from that, then God would actually reward them with eternal life. The third instance means that once they made their choice, they were immediately damned or they had the beatific vision immediately. That's a pretty quick succession of things, right? And so, right off the bat, they're either experiencing the pain of loss or they're enjoying the beatific vision. They're still in each other's presence for a little while, and this is one of the reasons why at a certain point God, and there's this battle that goes on in relationship to each other for a while, and then God gives St. Michael the power to cast them all into hell, right? So this is one of the things that happens. So why am I going into this? Well, first of all, if you look at, so I was dragging this demon through this process because he was given at his first instance, because part of his assigned task was to serve Our Lady, he actually got to see her interior life as she was going through the Passion. Okay, so this interior life, he said when he saw it, there was two different demons in this case. They both fell in relationship to the beauty of Our Lady. But he said when he saw this interior beauty of Our Lady, it was so absolutely beautiful that he couldn't bring himself to share her, even with God. He wanted her for himself, right? And this gives an indicator of how beautiful it was that it took him when he saw this. The other possessor in the case was Beelzebub. Now, Beelzebub is another name for Satan. And he said when he saw that beauty of Our Lady, he knew he would always be second best. He knew that there was no way he would ever achieve that level of beauty, and he wanted that beauty for himself. So at a certain point, I said to Beelzebub, because he'd mentioned that, a little bit later during the sessions, I said to him, I commanded him to tell me, what about her beauty didn't you like? Because he refused God to serve God's will because he had given Our Lady this beauty and he didn't give it to him. And I said, what about it didn't you like? And he said, well, it was the purity of her beauty. I'm like, well, that's a pretty broad statement. And then I said, well, what about the purity of her beauty didn't you like? He said, it was the purity of her love. And I'm like, well, that's a pretty broad statement too. What is it about the purity of her love that you didn't like? He said, it was the fact that when she sacrificed herself to God, she never once counted the personal cost. That means that Our Lady is different from every single individual sitting in this church. We always count the personal cost. We think about how much we're going to suffer when we have to give up something, right? I mean, as an exorcist, a lot of times I'll tell people to start fasting, and then all of a sudden you get the wailing and gnashing, and you go, Father, I can't do this. You're just like, it's not that hard, right? The point being is that we count the personal cost, even in our own personal relationships. You see this even in marriage, where people are, there's the relationship, and I kind of circle around a little bit to that in relationship to woundedness, is that they're calculating how much they're willing to give their spouse based on how much it's going to hurt, right? Okay. So then he said, and it wasn't just the fact that she never counted the personal cost. He said that basically she never, any time God asked her of anything, she never took herself into the accounting of the equation of what was to be done. She just said yes, she just did it, right? So there's this complete selflessness in that process. So in that sense, she's different from all of us. She's different from every other human being because we count the personal cost. But then he said, and it wasn't just that. It was the fact that she did it over and over and over again and never counted the personal cost once. That means that not only is she different from all of us, she's different from every single saint, she's different from every single angel in heaven. All of the angels, in fact, he said, what made me so angry was the fact that she got to sacrifice herself over and over and over again, and I only got to sacrifice myself once. And so he said, knowing that, I knew I could never achieve